I brought the man I love home to meet my family and they laughed. Said he was too handsome, too polished, too perfect for someone like me. I almost believed them until I met his family. And then everything made sense. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's all be internet friends. I never posted his face. Not fully. Just his hand holding mine in the car, the watch I gave him glinting in the sun, the corner of his smile during a late brunch. A side profile shot, blurry, warm, as he reached across the couch to grab the remote. I wasn't hiding him. I was protecting what we had from the noise I knew would come. People talk, especially my family. Especially when they think something beautiful doesn't belong to someone like me. Andre was too much of everything they liked: tall, tailored, quiet confidence. The kind of man Aunt Tasha would praise if he were standing next to someone else. The kind of man Cousin Brielle would post on her story and caption, "God, do it for me," as long as he wasn't doing it for me. So I shared him in pieces. Not because I was ashamed, but because peace is easier to hold when you're not bracing for commentary. I liked keeping something for myself, something soft and warm and uninterrupted. We lived in different states back then. Love looked like 11 p.m. FaceTime calls and long paragraphs that made my phone hot. He'd text me photos of sunsets and ask, "What would this look like on your skin?" I'd send back selfies with no makeup, bonnet and all, and he'd reply, "Still fine." He didn't just talk, he remembered. He remembered the name of the author I said I loved when we first met. Bought me a signed copy 3 months later. He remembered how I get quiet when I'm overwhelmed, not distant, just processing. So when he asked me to come visit, he didn't say, "When are you free?" He said, "What would feel good for you?" It was the first time I'd dated someone who didn't treat gentleness like a transaction. When he said he wanted to meet my family, I smiled, said yes, then immediately panicked, because I knew how this would go. They wouldn't see the softness, they'd see the polish. They'd look at him, then look at me and try to do the math. They'd get the equation wrong like they always do. And they'd do it out loud because subtlety was never our family's strength. But I said yes anyway, because I was proud, because I loved him, because I wanted them to see who he was, not just how he looked. I should have remembered, they never see past the surface. We didn't live in the same state. That made it easier in the beginning, easier to let it unfold slow, easier to keep it ours. He was based in DC, I was in Philly, just far enough for every visit to feel like an occasion, just close enough that "I miss you" didn't sting for long. We made it work. Late night FaceTimes. Good morning texts before meetings. Long weekends planned like tiny vacations, each one softening the distance. When I think back on those early months, I remember the stillness most. The way we weren't trying to impress each other. Just observe. I'd never had a relationship feel so safe that silence didn't scare me. He wasn't flashy, but he was particular. The way he folded his sweaters. The way he adjusted the seat in his car before I got in. The way he always made sure I walked on the inside of the sidewalk, even when we were arguing. It wasn't performative. It was patterned. He asked questions most people skipped. Not "What do you do?" but "What makes you stay where you are?" Not "What's your 5-year plan?" but "What have you always wanted to be told but never heard?" I found myself answering in ways I hadn't before. Not out of obligation, out of safety. He never commented on my body, just how I carried it. Said I moved like someone who'd been underestimated too often. Said he recognized it because he had too. That was the first time I asked him something real. "What made you notice me?" He said, "You weren't trying to be seen." That stayed with me. When I told Daphne, my best friend, about him, she called it immediately. "He sounds intentional." I replied, "He is." When he finally said, "I want to meet your people," it wasn't a grand gesture. Just a sentence said softly over dinner while slicing into a steak. I paused, fork midair, smiled, nodded. Then later that night, I laid awake replaying every family gathering I'd ever attended. Every sideways glance, every backhanded compliment, every "you got a man," said with smirks, not support. I tried to picture Andre in that setting. Tried to imagine him sitting across from Aunt Tasha while she peeled shrimp and picked people apart. Tried to picture Brielle whispering behind her wine glass, lips curled, eyes wide. It made my chest tight. Still, I told him I'd check dates. Still, I marked the weekend in my calendar, because love is only as safe as the places you're allowed to bring it, and I wanted him to fit in mine, even if I wasn't sure it would fit him. I didn't tell him I was nervous. He wouldn't have judged me for it, but still, I kept it tucked behind my smile. He was excited in that calm, grounded way he always carried himself, the kind of excited that made him call ahead to confirm the rental car, iron 2 shirts just in case, and double-check if my mom had any food allergies before he packed the wine. I watched him as we loaded up the car, me tossing in an overnight bag, him carefully fitting the gift basket he'd built for my mother. He said he wanted to make a good impression. I didn't tell him they'd already made up their minds. The drive was smooth. Warm sun, a jazz playlist he curated, long stretches of quiet that didn't need filling. He reached for my hand at a red light and said, "Thanks for bringing me home." I squeezed back and looked out the window. The closer we got, the more I felt that familiar press in my chest. That shrinking. That reflex I couldn't name but always felt. My family wasn't cruel exactly, just cutting. Always a joke at someone's expense. Always an observation wrapped in laughter that stung just long enough to remember it. I'd grown used to it, adjusted myself around it. But Andre hadn't. And something about bringing him into that space felt like throwing silk on a stain and hoping no one spilled again. Still, I told myself maybe it would be different. Maybe seeing him in person would soften them. Maybe they'd surprise me. He wore navy, a tailored button-down, polished boots. Carried himself like the room would adjust to him, not the other way around. I wore something simple, clean lines, no fuss, not to match him, to prepare for them. When we pulled into the driveway, he looked over and asked, "You ready?" I smiled and nodded, but inside, my stomach was folding itself into questions. We walked up to the door together. He held my hand, not tight, just present. My mother answered. Greeted him with a smile that was more startled than warm. Said, "You must be Andre," like she hadn't expected the version of him I brought. He handed her the basket. She thanked him, called it thoughtful. Her eyes skimmed me quickly, then landed back on him. Inside, Aunt Tasha was already sitting on the couch, drink in hand. Brielle leaned against the kitchen counter with her arms crossed, nails freshly done, phone flipped camera side down. And just like that, I knew. They'd already decided how this would go. I walked him in like he was a gift, not wrapped, not bragged about, just offered, softly, proudly, like, "Here, this is the person who sees me whole." But they didn't unwrap him gently. They peeled back the first layer with smirks. "Oh, this the boyfriend?" Aunt Tasha's voice carried like it always did, over everyone else, over boundaries, over common sense. Before I could answer, Brielle laughed. "You didn't tell us he was fine, girl." The word dragged, heavy with surprise, like it should have been obvious that someone like me wouldn't have someone like him. Andre smiled politely and said hello, offering his hand. Aunt Tasha looked him up and down, slow, like he was an application she wasn't planning to approve. She shook it anyway. "Got a good voice on you," she said. "Don't trust men with soft voices. That's how they get you." Brielle snorted. "You got brothers, Andre." He chuckled and said, "Just one, actually, but he's married." "Oh, so it runs in the family," Aunt Tasha muttered. I wasn't sure what she meant, but it didn't sound kind. My mom brought out a tray of crackers and cheese. Not even the kind we save for guests, just whatever was in the fridge. She said, "Make yourself comfortable," but didn't pull out a chair. Andre sat beside me anyway, still holding the small wrapped box he brought for my aunt, still trying. I took it from him and offered it across the table. "He brought this for you." Aunt Tasha opened it slowly, lifted the scented candle and said, "Fancy. You got taste, I'll give you that." Brielle added, "She always did like shiny things." The sentence landed somewhere between a compliment and a warning. Andre looked at me. I smiled, just barely. But inside, I'd already started pulling pieces of myself inward, folding again, quieting again. He reached for my hand under the table, squeezed once, and I realized he noticed. They never said it directly, but they didn't have to. You could feel it in the pauses, in the glances, in the way their smiles curled just a little too long after every joke. Like they were waiting to see if I'd laugh with them or finally speak up. What's a man like that doing with her? That's what they wanted to ask. maybe even tried to. Instead, Brielle whispered just loud enough near the hallway, her voice trailing behind her like perfume. He's too clean for her. I heard it. Andre did too. He didn't flinch. Just turned slightly toward me, kept nodding while Aunt Tasha launched into some half-baked story about a coworker's nephew who got catfished by a model. Men need to watch out, she said, eyes cutting toward Andre. Especially when they too good-looking. Can't trust a pretty face. He smiled, always polite. I try to be careful. She smirked MMHMM, and smart too. You sure you know what you're walking into? It was dressed up like a tease, but I felt the gut punch underneath. It wasn't curiosity, it was doubt. My mother walked in with more snacks, said, Tasha, gently, like she was tired. But she didn't say, stop. She never does. She just floats in between conflict like a curtain meant to soften, not to protect. Andre leaned closer. His hand brushed my knee. It wasn't a warning. It was reassurance. I looked up and they were watching us. Not like people proud of a match made right, like spectators waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like they were already deciding how long this would last. I caught my own reflection in the hallway mirror, shoulders tight, smile polite, jaw set. They always did this. Measured my joy with suspicion. Held it up like an outfit they didn't think I could afford, tugged at the seams. Waited for it to rip. But this time, I wasn't flinching for me. I was flinching for him. Later that night, after the laughter had dulled and the couch pillows had been rearranged just so, my mom found me in the kitchen rinsing out a wine glass that wasn't mine. She didn't say much at first, just hovered. That way she does when she wants to speak carefully without sounding like she's choosing sides. Eventually, she said, Tasha was just teasing. Don't take it to heart. I didn't answer. Because it wasn't just Tasha. It never is, she tried again. You know how your aunt gets, it's her way. I dried the glass slowly. It's always her way. Mom looked at me, then glanced toward the living room where Andre was still chatting with Brielle, smiling like he hadn't been picked apart all evening. He seems nice, she said. He is. She nodded once like she believed me. Then she added, he's a lot. I looked up, a lot. She hesitated, polished, formal, very put together. He brought you wine, I said, not angrily. Just plainly, she sighed. I just hope you're being realistic. Sometimes men like that. Like what? She shook her head, never mind. But she'd already said it. The tone, the doubt, the quiet press behind her eyes, it was all there. She didn't have to finish the sentence. Sometimes men like that don't stay with girls like me. Sometimes they just pass through. I felt the old feeling return. That need to defend, to explain. But I swallowed it. Andre walked into the kitchen then, wrapping his arm gently around my waist. Everything good. I smiled, yep, just talking. He kissed my cheek and asked Mom if she liked the wine. She said it was lovely. He offered to bring another bottle next time. She smiled. You don't have to do all that. But he would, because that's who he is. And I was already bracing for how they'd twist that too. Andre stayed polite. Through every jab dressed as a joke, every backhanded compliment, every awkward pause they left for him to fill, he kept his voice warm and his posture open. He asked questions, complimented the house, laughed at the right moments, even when the moments weren't funny. When Aunt Tasha launched into a monologue about her friend's daughter dating a good man with bad taste, he nodded thoughtfully and said, people surprise you. When Brielle asked if he'd ever dated someone with less education than him, he replied, I've always been drawn to people with substance. Degrees don't guarantee that. They didn't know what to do with that answer, too graceful to argue with, too clear to twist, but I saw it in his eyes, in the slight tension behind his smile. He was clocking it all, not offended, just registering. We stayed for dinner. The table was too full, the food a little underseasoned, the conversation louder than necessary. Andre kept pace, kept steady, kept my hand under the table, fingers brushing mine every few minutes like a pulse check. When he offered to help clean up, my mother waved him off. Guests don't do dishes. But they do bring candles, Aunt Tasha added. He chuckled, not missing a beat. Only the expensive kind. Later, as we stepped out into the night air, he opened the car door for me, waited until I was in, then got behind the wheel without starting the engine. He looked over at me and said, that was a lot. I didn't say anything, just nodded, watching the reflection of the porch light fade from the rearview mirror. "I'm okay," he added. "Just sorry you have to brace like that in your own home." My throat tightened. I whispered, "You noticed." He reached for my hand again, held it without squeezing this time. "I notice everything when it comes to you." That night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan humming overhead, I found myself staring at the shadows on the wall and wondering if they were right. Not just my aunt or Brielle, but the collective voice of everyone who'd ever looked at me like I was a placeholder, a warm-up. A woman worth liking, maybe even loving, but not choosing. Andre had never made me feel like that. But what if he was the exception? What if I was? I thought about the way he said my name, the way he listened, the way he made me feel like my presence didn't need translation. Then I thought about how I'd looked beside him tonight, how the room had reacted to us. Was it our difference in style? The way his clothes always looked pressed and mine just presentable? Was it the way he spoke, soft, assured, next to my family's noise and interruption? Was it me? I knew it wasn't his fault. He didn't ask for the way their eyes followed him, didn't provoke the questions dressed as curiosity. He just existed fully, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd gotten used to shrinking. I reached for my phone and scrolled through our texts, not to find reassurance, but to remember how we started. To trace the line back to where I stopped questioning his presence and started questioning my worth. I didn't find the moment, because it never came. Still, I couldn't stop the spiral. I thought about his exes, the ones I'd never met, never asked about. I imagined them gliding through rooms like they belonged. I imagined them not needing to explain. I imagined me in comparison. And for the first time in months, I felt like the visitor in my own relationship. I turned to look at him, his face relaxed in sleep, one arm resting across his chest. He looked peaceful. I felt the opposite. And that's when I realized the damage wasn't from them laughing. It was from me almost believing it. Daphne called the next morning, like she always does when something in me shifts and I don't say it out loud. We'd been best friends long enough that she didn't need a reason, just instinct. What they say this time? I was still sitting on the edge of the bed, legs dangling over the side, Andre's cologne faint on the pillow behind me. I didn't answer right away, she didn't press. Just let the silence sit between us, steady and open. "They didn't say anything," I finally murmured. "Not really, but they laughed." There was a pause, then. That specific kind of laugh. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah," I said, "that one." I heard her exhale through her nose. "The one that pretends to be about them, but is really about you." Exactly. She didn't try to sugarcoat it. That's why I'd always trusted her. I told her what they said or didn't say, about the look Brielle gave me, the comments, the tone, the way my mom didn't step in. Then I told her the worst part. I started wondering if they were right. She was quiet for a second, then asked, "You mean about you or about him?" I blinked, both. She didn't get soft, didn't coddle. She just said, "That man chose you, not once, not passively. Over and over. The problem isn't him being too perfect. The problem is them not knowing how to receive someone who doesn't need to be fixed." I felt something unclench in my chest. Then she added, "And don't forget, they don't get to define what fits. You do." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks. Any time," she said. "Now go eat something before you start spiraling about outfits that don't matter." I laughed finally. She hung up after telling me she loved me. I stared at the phone for a while, then turned around to find Andre still asleep, one arm now stretched across my side of the bed like he'd noticed my absence, even in dreams. And I realized she was right. He chose me. And every time I doubted it, I was letting someone else write our story. Andre took me to meet his family the following weekend. He didn't announce it like some grand reveal, just mentioned it over breakfast as he poured syrup on my waffles. "My mom's hosting a small thing Sunday," he said casually. "She'd love to meet you." I looked up from my plate. "You sure?" He leaned across the table and kissed my forehead. "You don't have to impress anyone, just be yourself. That's more than enough." I believed him, or at least I tried to. I packed light, a soft dress, nothing too formal. I kept my makeup simple, not because I was trying to appear a certain way, but because I wanted to feel like myself walking in. No masks, no posture adjustments, no performance. His family lived in a brownstone with potted plants on every step. The kind of place that smelled like comfort before you even opened the door. As soon as we stepped inside, a warm voice called from the back, "Andre. That you, baby?" He smiled and called back, "Yeah, Ma," and I brought someone special. I barely had time to brace myself before she appeared, petite, gray streaks through soft curls. A smile that wasn't showy, just genuine. "You must be Sloane," she said. I nodded, suddenly nervous. But then she stepped closer and took both of my hands in hers, like she'd known me for years. "I've heard nothing but kindness about you," she said. "Welcome home." And just like that, the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying left my shoulders. Inside, the house was filled with soft music and even softer conversation. No shouting, no layered sarcasm. Just easy movement, a niece showing off her art project, an uncle teasing Andre about his high school haircut, a cousin offering me a drink with a wink and a plate of crackers. No one asked what I did to land Andre. No one asked how we met with raised brows. No one asked anything meant to corner me into proving I belonged. They just welcomed me, not like an outsider, like a new piece to something they'd already decided was worth keeping whole. His sister made me tea. I didn't ask for it. I was just sitting on the edge of the sectional, chatting with his cousin about music, when she walked in carrying a small cup on a saucer like it was second nature. "Chamomile," she said, handing it over with a smile. "You look like you think a lot, this helps." I blinked, surprised, then smiled back. "Thank you." She introduced herself as Lena, younger than Andre by 3 years. Soft voice, curious eyes, but a presence that filled the room without asking permission. The kind of woman who made you feel safe just by sitting near you. She asked about my writing, something Andre must have told her about. Asked where I got my ideas, what I loved about stories. Not in that polite, bored way people sometimes ask questions at gatherings. She really listened. She let me talk, didn't interrupt, didn't twist my words into something to tease. I found myself relaxing without realizing I'd been tense. At one point, she said, "I like how you explain things. You don't just say stuff, you build it." I laughed. That's the first time anyone's ever said that to me. She tilted her head. Then people haven't been paying attention. It was quiet, that moment, but it landed louder than most praise I'd ever received. Later, she showed me a photo album on her phone. Her and Andre as kids, birthdays and holidays, awkward middle school haircuts. She said, "He's always been careful with who he lets in. Always pays attention to how people move when no one's watching." Then she looked up and added, "You move soft, but not small." I held her gaze for a second. Didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Because that right there, was the first time someone in his world made me feel like I fit without needing to shrink to do it. His mother pulled me aside while Andre was helping his uncle carry something to the car. It wasn't dramatic. No hush in her voice. No heavy sigh like she was about to warn me. Just a quiet moment in the hallway between the kitchen and the den, where sunlight spilled through the window and touched the top of her gray curls. "I wanted a moment with you," she said, gesturing for me to sit beside her on the bench by the stairs. I sat, folding my hands in my lap, heart steady but alert. She didn't waste time. "I don't know what your people are like," she began gently. "And I don't need to, but I hope they see you clearly, because I do." I blinked, caught between gratitude and disbelief. She continued, "You carry yourself like someone who's been misunderstood before. I can see it in how you pause before you speak, how you measure your presence. I used to do that, too." My throat tightened. She smiled, warm and direct. "But you don't have to do that here." I looked down, trying to keep the tears in check. She reached over and touched my knee lightly. Andre has always been the calm in the room. I worried for a long time that he'd choose someone who couldn't meet him there, someone loud in the wrong ways. But you're quiet like peace, not quiet like fear, and that's the difference. I opened my mouth to respond, but she shook her head softly. "I'm not asking for anything, not asking if y'all are serious, not asking about timelines, just wanted you to know I see it, the way you look at him, the way he breathes easier around you. You're good for him. I see it." And then, like the conversation had never happened, she patted my leg, stood up, and asked if I wanted more of her peach cobbler before it ran out. I followed her back into the kitchen, dazed and full and steadier than I'd been in weeks. Because sometimes the kindest thing someone can give you is confirmation, not because you asked, but because they noticed. I cried in his car. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears slipping down as we pulled out of the driveway, the warmth of his mother's house still clinging to my clothes like fabric softener. Andre didn't say anything at first, just drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting palm up between us, waiting for me to take it. I did. That's when he glanced over and saw my face. He didn't ask what was wrong, didn't press. Just squeezed my hand gently and said, "I told you they'd love you." I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. I wiped my cheek with the sleeve of my sweater and whispered, "I didn't know how heavy it was until I stepped out of it." He nodded. "I know." I looked out the window, watching the streetlights blur past. "Your mom," she said, "I carry myself like someone who's been misunderstood." "Because you do." I turned toward him. "Do you see me that way?" He shook his head. "I see you, the whole of you, not just how you've been shaped." Another tear slipped out, not from sadness, from recognition. The kind you only get when someone really means what they say. He pulled into a gas station, parked, and turned off the engine, then shifted to face me. "Listen," he said, voice low, "I didn't fall in love with you because you're perfect. I fell in love with you because you feel like home, even to someone who never quite knew what that meant before." I swallowed hard, but what if they never see it? He leaned closer, forehead nearly touching mine. "Then that's their loss. Not yours." The engine stayed off for a while. The car was warm. The world was quiet. I rested my head on his shoulder, eyes closed, heart unspooling. For once, I wasn't replaying conversations or bracing for the next comment. For once, I wasn't shrinking to be palatable. I was just held. I stopped trying to fit their mold the moment I got home. It wasn't loud. I didn't throw away clothes or unfollow anyone or make some declaration on Instagram. I just woke up the next morning and decided to stop asking questions I already knew the answers to. I wasn't the problem. Their standards were. The kind that praised loud boys who disappeared when things got hard. The kind that labeled gentleness as weakness unless it came wrapped in ambition or money. The kind that said love yourself, but only if you stayed quiet about it. Growing up, I learned how to take jokes that weren't funny, how to wear clothes that didn't call too much attention, how to be smart but not smug, how to want things without saying them out loud. But after sitting in Andre's mother's kitchen, after Lena handed me tea and looked me in the eye like I deserved to be heard, I realized how much energy I'd spent muting myself. They never told me I had to shrink, but I learned anyway. Learned from the way they praised me when I wore neutral colors, but clucked their tongues when I dyed my hair red that one summer. Learned from how they complimented my manners more than my mind. From how they talked over me at dinner, then told me I was too sensitive when I spoke up. So I stopped. I stopped trying to be the version of myself they might someday approve of. Instead, I returned to the version Andre met. The one who didn't apologize before expressing a thought. The one who wore her curls big and laughed from her belly and asked too many questions on the first date. That girl, she wasn't someone I had to become. She was someone I'd buried to survive. And now I was digging her out. My mother called later that week. Her tone was careful, the kind she used when she knew she'd crossed a line but didn't want to name it. She started with small talk. Asked if work was still busy, if I'd remembered to water the plants on my windowsill. Then, as if she'd just thought of it, she added, "You were quiet after dinner. He okay?" I stared at the ceiling for a moment before answering. "He's perfect." There was a pause on her end. Then I said, "And I am too. Even if you can't see it." The silence after that stretched long, not angry, just startled. She tried to smooth it over like she always did. "I didn't mean anything by it. You know how your aunt can be." "I wasn't talking about her," I said. Another pause. "I just want what's best for you," she finally offered. I kept my voice steady. "Then maybe trust me when I say I've found it." I didn't wait for approval. I didn't explain or cushion or soften the truth. I let it hang there, unapologetic, unpacked, full. She shifted the conversation after that back to neutral ground, something about a neighbor's renovation project. I listened, responded politely, but I didn't shrink, not even a little. When the call ended, I didn't replay it. Didn't wonder if I'd been too harsh or if she'd hang up thinking I'd changed. because I had. I'd stopped asking for belief from people who couldn't see past their own projections. And in that moment, I felt taller. Not because she agreed with me, but because I didn't need her to. Brielle DM'd me the next day. It was a picture I'd posted of Andre and me at brunch, nothing fancy. Just us in matching earth tones, smiling into each other like the world had stepped aside to give us room. I hadn't added a caption. Didn't need to. Her message came underneath it. Loki, y'all actually look cute. No emoji, no punctuation, just those words, a confession disguised as a compliment. I stared at it for a long time. 3 months ago, I would have responded. Something short but friendly, maybe a laughing emoji or a polite thanks girl. I would have taken the olive branch even if it was wilted, tried to stretch it into something more. But now I left it on read, not to be petty, not to punish her, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't hungry for crumbs from a table that had never been set for me. I didn't need her to change her mind. I didn't need her to reframe the memory of that night or apologize for the way she smiled while mocking me. I just didn't care anymore. I showed Andre the message that evening. He read it, then passed the phone back without a word. You think that's growth? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. Yours or hers? I smiled, both maybe. He leaned in, kissed the side of my head, and said, as long as you're not shrinking to make room for anyone else's comfort, I'm good. And I was. For once, I truly was. Aunt Tasha sent a group text the following week. It was one of those long message threads she usually used to share outdated memes or warnings about fake cash giveaways. But this time, it was a screenshot of Andre from my brunch post, cropped just right with the message. He got any brothers? Asking for a friend lol, laughing emoji, winking face. Then 2 heart eyes for good measure. The group chat lit up with replies, cousins tossing in jokes, someone else posting a gif of a woman fainting. Suddenly, everyone was in on it. Suddenly, Andre was charming, handsome, funny. Suddenly, the man who was too polished and too clean for me had become someone worth knowing. I read it once, then muted the thread. They weren't asking about him, they were performing. Trying to slide back into my world now that it was clear he wasn't temporary, that he wasn't scared off, that he wasn't playing. They never asked how I was, never said, you two looked happy. Never offered a quiet, I'm sorry we made that night so heavy. Just, does he have a brother? Like my life was a catalog and they were flipping through the pages. I didn't respond. Andre never saw the message. I didn't show him, not because I was hiding it, but because I knew his reaction would be simple. Calm. Dismissive, he'd say, of course they want to laugh with you now. But where were they when they laughed at you? And he'd be right. I poured a glass of wine that night, turned my phone face down, and let the silence speak louder than I ever had. Andre noticed it before I did. We were at the farmer's market, warm coffee in one hand, a bag of produce in the other, when he glanced at me between vendors and said, you don't shrink anymore. I blinked mid-sip. Shrink? He nodded, used to walk 2 steps behind, talked softer in crowds. You'd edit your stories depending on who was around. I looked up at him, caught off guard by how gently he said it. And now, I asked. He didn't hesitate. Now you move like someone who knows she belongs. We kept walking, but the words stayed. They echoed in a good way, not like a memory, but like a truth I was finally ready to believe. It wasn't about posture or volume. It was about presence. The way I stopped waiting for someone to make space and started assuming it was already mine. I wasn't louder, just lighter. Not bolder, just unburdened. At dinner that night, I told him, not everything, not the decades of self-adjusting or the weight of generational silence. Just a piece. I used to think being chosen meant being agreeable. Being less. He reached across the table and brushed a crumb from the corner of my lip. And now. I smiled. Now I know being loved means being seen. Fully. He didn't respond, just raised his glass in quiet agreement. I toasted back because it wasn't that I'd changed. It was that I'd finally come home to myself. We went back once more a few weeks later, not for a holiday, not for an occasion. Just a regular Sunday dinner my mom asked us to stop by for. No pressure, she said, just food and family. But this time, I didn't come dressed for defense. I wore what I wanted, a flowy green dress that hugged all the curves I used to try to hide. My hair out, not slicked back. Earrings bold, lip gloss unapologetic. I walked in with Andre like we weren't asking for permission to be seen together, because we weren't. They noticed, of course. You could feel it in the pause when we walked through the door, a glance that flicked from my shoes to my smile. But nobody said a word, at least not out loud. Brielle gave me a once-over and then turned back to her phone. Aunt Tasha raised an eyebrow, said, "Okay, Miss Thing," with a grin too slow to sting. My mom kissed my cheek and told Andre he looked handsome, her voice soft but unsure. We sat, ate, talked. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. And more importantly, I didn't shrink to fit whatever mood they'd laid out. When someone brought up Andre's job, I didn't defer. When someone asked about our plans, I didn't flinch. I answered with my full chest, my full voice, my full self. And when I laughed at something Andre whispered in my ear, I didn't look around to see who was watching. I didn't need to, because for the first time, I wasn't performing. I was arriving. They laughed again. Something about a meme Brielle showed. Something about couples who looked mismatched. Something not subtle, but just indirect enough to float in the space between conversation and cruelty. I heard it. I felt it. But this time, it didn't touch me. Because this time, I wasn't standing in the middle of the room hoping to be absorbed. I was standing beside the man I loved, already full, already chosen, already home. Andre didn't respond. Didn't need to. He looked at me once, slow and soft, and that was it. We finished our plates, said our goodbyes, walked out hand in hand. The air felt lighter the moment the door closed behind us. We didn't talk about what they said. We didn't have to. That night, we drove to a house we'd just put an offer on. Quiet neighborhood, warm porch, big windows. We parked in the driveway even though it wasn't ours yet. Sat in the silence, imagining it would be. I looked over at him. "You still sure about me?" He turned toward me like the question was ridiculous. I was always sure. And I believed him, not because he said it. Because he never made me feel like I had to ask in the first place. We didn't unpack bags that night. Just hopes. We didn't toast champagne, just shared a soda and leaned against the hood of the car. And when I looked around at all the space we'd made, not for appearances, not for approval, but for peace, I knew this was ours. This was me. And the only voice I trusted now was my own. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.